Hi, welcome to our professional development session today. If you haven't already done so, please follow the instructions on the screen to find some sort of a visual that has meaning to you and post it on the Padlet. We'll come back and talk about that in just a few minutes. So this is our topic for today is visual literacy. And this is a topic that I am very fond of. So I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. That said, I'm going to let you know that this is probably the first of several PD sessions that we will be covering on this topic. When I went to Kathy Schrock's website, this is a visual that she had on there, 13 literacies for the digital age. Now, mind you, I won't be doing PD sessions on all 13 of them, but we do have a lot, there's a lot of material on this topic to cover, and we're only going to scratch the surface a bit today. And so here's what we are going to be taking a look at. We're going to think about the visual components of the things that compose a visual component. We're definitely, as always, going to be looking at the pedagogical rationale and then talk about how we can integrate visuals intentionally into our content. So when we're thinking about our visuals, there are several parts to the definition for visuals. One is that we can, for being visually literate, one is that we can interpret the images or the visuals that we see, the graphics that we see, and make some meaning of them, that we are able to communicate that interpretation and that meaning to others, and then to carry it another step further, that we can produce visuals that have meaning. And another definition for it has to do with being able to use the visuals to problem solve and come up with solutions. And this is from Christensen, and this was from a keynote address he gave at an international conference on visual literacy. And just as an example to the interpretation one, I have one that I want to share with you. This is an Ansel Adams photograph, and if you dabble in photography at all, you're probably quite familiar with his look and the appeal of it. So take a moment to take a look at it and think about what might be the meaning behind this photograph. And this is from an ISTE document, International Society for Technology and Education. So it is indeed a beautiful photograph. However, every photographer sees the world from a specific perspective, and what winds up showing in the camera may or may not be the whole picture. Would it make a difference in how you interpret this picture if I told you that this image was shot outside of a Japanese internment camp during the war, and this was the view that the Japanese had as they went out into the garden area? Makes a little bit of a difference in the image that he was portraying, right? So what I would like for you to do right now is to go into the chat room and share something that visually that you have seen recently, or perhaps that you have used yourself. And then we will have you raise your hands or let him open the mic for us so that you can say something about that. And I'm going to invite you, as you do that, to also introduce yourself and then just make a comment about a recent visual element that you have seen or used. All right, so who would like to jump into the conversation? All right, so let's hear. Kathy and Mary both, I see, have hands up. What's something that you have seen? First of all, of course, please introduce yourself. And a visual that you have either seen, a visual element you've seen, or perhaps one that you've used in something.
Mary, you can go first.
Sure, go right ahead.
So yeah, I found this little image of Oliver Wendell Jones on his Banana Junior 6000, and it just brought me back to my high school and college days, just loving Bloom County, and when the first Apple computers came out, and he was in love with his computer. They turned it into like a animated character where it would follow him around and, you know, kind of worship Ted Koppel and stuff, or Dan Rather. Yeah, it was great. Really, really
That's
good.
great. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and Apple aficionados are kind of a cult, aren't they?
Well, maybe not so much now that Steve Jobs is gone, but I certainly was part of it before.
Yeah. All right. Who else would like to join in the conversation? Ooh, nice. And so my question would be, is that a calming visual for you, or is it something else? Does it have another significance for you?
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So hi, everybody. And it's a fun visual. When I'm standing in my kitchen, I can see our pool and all these raindrops like coming and somehow changing the surface of the pool. And it looks like a lot is happening. There's a lot of commotion. So the surface of the pool is not smooth, but all these little circles are happening and then they're coming together. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you. Anybody else? Please feel free to jump right in. The one I have on the screen here is one that we've seen off and on for a number of years. It was taken in 2012 from space, and it is a NASA photograph. And by the way, most NASA photographs are copyright compliant, usually are Creative Commons, but it gives a pretty graphic image of a number of different perspectives about how the world looks. So let's take a look at this. Is a infographic that I want to share with you. So let me go to that. And this is, the link to this will be in the reference list that you will get with your notes. This is the power of visual communication infographic. And it's a fairly long one. I will scroll down. Some of the things I'll let you read, and some of the things we'll have a conversation about. And if there's something you want to add to that conversation, please do so. Looks like there's a lot going on inside this, the power of visual communication. And we've talked a little bit about the definitions, and it's being able to interpret the ideas that we see in the visuals. And they show a number of different types of visuals in here. So how effective is it? We've always heard the phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that's probably even more so now. And the feeling now that is that more and more and more of the world is being interpreted through visuals rather than text. And we've seen multiple variations on this information. 10% of what we hear, 20% of what we read, but 80% of what we see and do. And I've had another one of the things that I found in the research was that 90% of everything that comes into our brain at least starts out as a visual image. This one is interesting, that 93% of communication is nonverbal. So that's pretty powerful information. And visuals are processed much, much faster than the text is. And then the advertising dollars, of course, are totally based on visuals. A little bit of history on this, which I thought was pretty interesting. Cave people did the engraving. There was some sculpture, some body ornamentation in cave paintings. And then the petroglyphs, and I had the opportunity to see some a couple of weeks back that are just incredible to see how these things are created and interpreted and still there for us to see, that where they're images that are carved in the rock. So there's a number of different visual styles represented in this. A term which I wasn't familiar with until I saw this, the term ideograms, but it indicates that a graphic symbol that represents something was developed 5,000 years ago. The two images, of course, that we see there are more recent ones. And the Asian influence, the way that they represent words, of course, totally different than the alphabet that we use, in that the drawings represent words rather than the letters. And of course, then our own alphabet that started 2,000 years ago, and the idea of the way we know the alphabet today. And then from moving from the alphabet into books, and the original ones were manuscripts that were usually written, and according to this, primarily on papyrus. And then once the printing press was developed, then we created all kinds of books and continue to do so. There's a lot of research on the fonts and the font style and how they are the kind of a message the use of fonts can portray in the visuals, the weight, the slope, the style for it, about how those things are created. And of course, the study of statistics and the visualizations within statistics, showing the different types of charts and the way we read and interpret those charts is definitely a skill, and it's a skill that most people can pretty easily adapt. Then we move into a little bit more modern ideas on graphic design, although not as modern as we might think. So commercial advertising started out in the 16th century, and computer graphics were used a little more recently, 1960, although I don't think there were too many people checking out computer graphics at that point. But nowadays, graphic design is certainly a profession. And then the use of video, and then digital photography, which was 1981, according to this. I didn't get into digital photography quite that early. And the bottom of this lists all of the resources for that. So that's some pretty interesting information. Any comments on that while I'm taking us back to our presentation? So the power of visual communication, it impacts everyone. One of the things that important pieces of it is that it has an impact globally, because it's almost a universal language, in that we don't have to interpret into another language in order to understand the visuals. Visuals are used in trauma resolution. They're used for non-English speakers to help get them accustomed to the different types of terminology, the words that we use. And interestingly, there is some correlation between visual literacy and intelligence and performance within technical fields. So there's a lot to think about with that. Okay. Kathy, jump right in, my dear.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, while you were talking, I was thinking about some sort of tongue-in-cheek things about emojis. And so I put it up on the Padlet. There's this hieroglyphics versus emojis, and kind of going back to those ancient.
So we're reverting back. Huh?
That's what the joke is.
Yeah.
And then I was also thinking, on the flip side, the advantages in terms of my daughter does American Sign Language, and the ability to communicate when you can't use words.
Absolutely.
So it's just kind of both are. The other thing I was thinking about, we were watching the Patriots game last night, and this commercial for a sports car came on, and all it was just, you'd see the car, but then you'd also see just this woman, just her high heel shoe on the pedal, and she's putting on her lipstick, and like there were no words.
Did it make you want to go out and buy the car?
Well, no, but it wasn't targeted to me, I think. So.
So maybe you needed to go out and buy the shoes first, right?
Yeah, that would be or the lipstick.
Yeah.
But it was great. I mean, it was clear what the message was.
Yes, definitely. And commercials, when you look at them from that perspective, are very, very definitely know the whole, they're created for that visual impact, totally, start to finish. So let's take a look at the Padlet, and we'll think about the elements within it that draw you into the visuals. So I'm going to go back over and go into the Padlet. And so there's You'll Be a Star. There's oh, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, and the American Sign Language thing. So think about the visuals that you posted in there. What are the components of those things that draw you into it? What's compelling about them?
Hi, this is Mary. Can you?
Hi.
So for mine, it's a phrase that I think I try to live by, and I also like the simplicity of the drawing, and it kind of made me feel I can connect to this. This is something that I could have in any of my rooms at the house. So it's just the simplicity of it and how homey it made me feel.
Absolutely. What else? What else do you see in any of these that makes it compelling, makes it something that you can relate to? We know the Just Breathe, and I know I've had that feeling at various times myself, and look forward to just taking that quiet, deep breath and recentering, which is an important piece for us.
Is my mic on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I was just thinking at the different color schemes that are in these images.
Uh-huh.
You know, the You'll Be a Star, it's kind of speaks of the silent movie days.
Yes.
And the red and blue is clearly, let's pay attention to this. It's the primary colors.
Right.
And then I love the cartoon about, I'm sure it must keep going this way. It's just really clear. It's a funny, but it's also it's just engaging. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the other ones are softer. They're more soothing and relaxing.
Yeah. So you mentioned color as being one of the components. You mentioned the message that you see both in the cartoon but in the star, and we also talked about the message in Mary's. What else? What are some other pieces of it that draw you in? I love the little guy with the computer. Okay, so let me get us back. So the elements that tend to draw us into a visual, and I have jotted down a few of them. I'm sure that there are others as well. So the image itself is part of what draws us in. And seeing that image and thinking about what it brings to us. The text, we saw different types of text on the different ones, and with each one of them, the text, the actual words plus the font is part of it. It gives you part of that message. And I think with all of them, there's a story in there. We can look at it and get the story. We can get the message that's in there. And being effective visuals has a lot to do with the storytelling aspect of it. And we can make connections within all of them. Those connections we connected to Mary's with the just breathe. We almost automatically, when we see that, intuitively stop and take a deep breath and then refocus ourselves, which takes us into the emotions involved. The cartoon one had, yeah, I get that. We've all done that, but so does the little guy sitting there looking at the computer. We've made that connection before too. Find things on there that just really draws in, really make us feel, yeah, he had a little heart on that. Humor is a huge piece of it, and it works to reach us. And of course, we all know that we have to use caution with our humor, but there's a piece of it that really reaches everyone when we see something that's humorous. And so we have reached all of our senses using this. Any comments or anything that I've omitted in there? All right. So those are some of the elements of a visual. They would not all necessarily be in each one, but many components are in. Many of them are in almost any visual element or graphical element that we find and use. This is a quote by Linnell Burmark, and I've got two different books of hers. One, the original one, not the original, but the first one she put out on visual literacy, and I think this is a quote from that one. But I've seen her at various conferences, and she does some really, really effective presentations simply by using visuals with minimal text in there. So according to what she said, and this was probably 10 years back even, that visual literacy is truly the new currency of learning. And based on where we've come since she made that statement, I would say that it's even more so now, much more so now. Okay, yes, Kat?
Hi, yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking about students and how, I mean, it's so true that everything has pictures. It just, and I was looking at this picture of the walkway to the beach and thinking that there needs to be some kind of connection with previous experience, I think.
Yes.
That if you've never been to the beach, all you can get is the picture of it, but when I look at that picture, I can feel the breeze and I can hear the ocean and I can even smell it because I'm so familiar with that. But somebody who's not had that experience isn't going to benefit as much. Like you said with the Japanese internment camp, you know.
Yes, until you've seen it on the other side of the camera, it's hard to tell what else was there. And that's one of the things that I read in one of the articles had to do with the fact that many of our lower socioeconomic students come to school without the actual experiential learning that so many of the rest of those students do. And yet they also come to school with a much more time spent, much more screen time. So they've been involved in the visuals practically from who knows how early. I wouldn't even begin to guess. And so much of their view of the world has come solely from the graphics and the visuals that they have been seeing all their life. So it makes it a little bit of a
well, and with so much visual experience, it's going to become more and more so. I think that there might be a blurring of what's real and what's pretend. And you know, when I was teaching, I would show these wonderful videos with, you know, Iceland and gorgeous places and tell my students who were at-risk kids, you know, these are real places. You can really go to these places. And they didn't believe me in a lot of cases. You know, like, yes, you really can get on an airplane. Okay, now see this one, that's pretend. You know, and they kind of, you know, there's just some background information that sometimes needs to get built in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some way of helping them grasp, and the one of the links I have is from Kathy Schrock's website about how to teach kids how to tell when there's the difference between what's really visually there and something that's a representation or a figment of someone's imagination. This is just another little example. These are some teaching images that I have had actually for quite a while, and so here's my message. If we're not modeling the use of visuals, we know they're going to get it elsewhere. So how do we determine what to use and what to produce? So that leads me to my question for you. What's your takeaway? How can you intentionally incorporate the use of visuals and graphics into the content that you use on a daily basis or on a weekly basis at whatever point you're functioning with other people, whenever you're interacting in one way or another. So how can you, what can you add? What's your intent? Right.
Well, certainly adding as many relevant pictures as you can. In the samples that we see on the Padlet, the text really matches the style of the images.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, using fonts and matching that up with the intent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Of the item. And then, you know, with the modeling, we've said it before, but just needing to be careful to honor copyright law and that sort of thing, and maybe branch out with how to do programs like Illustrator, where you can make your own little quick designs, or finding images that are shareable.
Yeah, and many of the images that I use are from the Creative Commons, which are copyright compliant, and many of them are my own. The images from, let me see if I can go back to that one. This is a series of things that I purchased, and they have the copyright link down at the bottom, and so that I have that capability of using them. But yes, and it did not occur to me to put the links to some of the copyright friendly sources, but what I will put in the reference before I send it out is our reference librarian's LibGuide on images and where to find copyright compliant images. So thank you for mentioning that, Kathy. So as you're thinking about it, think about how you will intentionally use graphics, images, and the various things in order to create the visual impact that needs to be a part of what we do. So I actually have like 2 pages of references because I didn't want to cram it all onto one page. So there's one of them, that's the Christofferson quote. There's Linnell Burmark's two books, and then this one is this one. She says, yeah, is where, and when you receive it in your thank you email, it will be on a regular document so that you can see it. But that's the link to the infographic that we used. So I appreciate everything that you have contributed to this session. As I said, there's so much information on this topic, and we will be doing additional sessions on various aspects of it. Next week, we have our topic is gamification basics and how those are applied within a course. After that, we'll have a time management one, and then the following week, helping the struggling online learners. So I appreciate your input, and I appreciate the fact that you have joined me today. If you're joining online, please feel free to jot down some notes about these things, or if you're viewing this as a video, jot down some notes, and please feel free to reach out to us for any questions or comments that you have. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy.